Hi, thank you for watching Wild One's Native Garden Design Series. My name is Jen Ainsworth, and I serve as Wild One's Executive Director. I'm honored to take part in this discussion with Donna Giguere, designer of our Portland Native Garden Design. For those of you who are new to Wild Ones, we are a membership organization devoted to promoting the use of native plants to creating sustainable landscapes. We carry out our mission through educational programs and resources and provide programs such as Wild Ones Journal, Native Garden Designs, Seeds for Education grants, and educational webinars. At the local level, Wild Ones chapters offer programs including garden tours, speakers, conferences, native plant sales, and seed exchanges. Wild Ones has 75 chapters and 27 seedlings in 29 states across the country. If you're not a Wild Ones member, we hope you join us to take advantage of the camaraderie and support of being part of a local chapter because our critical mission needs you. Wild Ones chapters are where members put mission into action, get their hands dirty, and learn by doing. Chapters are actively recruiting chapter officers and volunteers to plan the year's programs. Chapter activities require the time and talents of many different people to coordinate. Amplify the impact you have in the native plant movement by sharing your skills and enthusiasm with others. Please reach out to your local chapter to find out how to get involved. What if there's not a chapter near you? We ask you to please consider starting a Wild Ones seedling in your area. Start the conversation with Wild Ones, and we can help connect you with others interested in joining you to start a chapter. Wild Ones inspires and empowers people and communities across the country to transform home landscapes into vibrant and essential habitats for all forms of life. Programs like this would not be possible without generous support from our members, donors, and folks like you attending Wild Ones programs. Please consider donating to Wild Ones today by visiting wildones.org. Wild Ones Native Garden Designs follow the premise that native plants and landscaping can be beautiful, beneficial, and achievable for gardeners of all skill sets in terms of scope and budget. This program contains resources that include information on how to get started by identifying your ecoregion, selecting and determining plant placement in your yard, considering your own specific climate conditions, and finding local native plant nurseries in your area. The program also features a growing number of free downloadable native garden designs created by professional landscape designers representing various ecoregions in the US. A plant list accompanies each design and provides a quick preview of the diversity and beauty of the native plants incorporated in the design. A phased approach is also included, and all of which can be downloaded and printed easily at home. All designs are assembled using native plants that provide habitat and food for wildlife and offer a colorful and beautiful garden throughout the growing season. We hope these resources inspire, encourage, and motivate you in your own native garden journey. We're honored today to have Donna Giguere join us today to show her creative insights on her approach on preparing sites, selecting plants, and designing home landscapes in the Portland area. Donna's going to walk us through her selected plants, placement, and site preparation tips, along with climate considerations for the Willamette Valley ecoregion. Donna earned her Bachelor of Science Art degree in sculpture from Portland State University while also studying and practicing horticulture. She received her landscape design education from landscape architects at Clomacus Community College. Her artistic ability has led to awards in sculpture and in landscape design. She was a certified fellow of the International Association of Professional Landscape Designers and is a founding member of the Oregon chapter. She's a member of the Native Plant Society of Oregon and Association of Northwest Landscape Designers. With over 26 years of practice, lots of hard work and joy, she intends to continue to focus on native plants. Welcome, Donna, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the introduction.
So before we get started into the details of your design, I was hoping you'd be able to explain a bit about Portland's seasonal weather, temperatures Portland experiences, and any other climate conditions that viewers who are new to Portland should know about.
Well, tends to rain quite a bit, but I would say the patterns of rain have changed. It used to just be kind of misty, like 9 months out of the year. And now we tend to have dry periods followed by a deluge of rain, heavy rains. So things are a little bit different, I've noticed, maybe in the past 5-10 years. But generally, we have a Mediterranean climate, meaning we have wet winter and spring and fall and dry summer. Like last year, we had a really wet spring, a late spring. Not last year, this year. The previous year, we had 116 degrees on the first day of summer, which is like a 10,000 year event.
Yeah.
So that was the heat dome.
Yeah.
So it's been just really variable, but generally, wet winter, dry summer, and mild temperatures in the winter. We've had snows that I'd say in the past maybe 5-10 years again, that really haven't damaged the plants. They were more like insulation.
Sure.
So rarely below 20. It's just maybe hovering between freezing and I don't know, maybe 24. So but it's generally very mild. And when we do have, these extreme climate events, I'd say the native plants tend to bounce back easier.
And so when you think about extreme climate events, you mentioned snow that acted as an insulator, and then the extreme heat, as those the two that are really prominent out there right now?
Just that the snows weren't as cold. It used to be like a lot of things would just freeze and you'd lose all the leaves, and they would, come back. But just the winters aren't as harsh, I would say. Yeah, not as much ice.
And so you're noticing that the native plants in the installments that you're doing are surviving those extreme climate events better than the non-native plants or other landscaping.
Yes. One thing though, it used to be you could kind of depend on rain, watering your new plantings, plant in the fall. But we've had some dry winters too. And so they need to be watered more than before to establish them.
Okay.
I would say, yes, I'm actually recommending irrigation to establish, maybe a temporary drip or something.
Is that new in your practice of designing landscapes and green installations?
I don't know about new, but it seems more prevalent. It's just very dry. Like right now, we've had a really warm summer. Very little rain, which is typical, but the ground is just dry. I don't know, 2 feet down. It's just dry as a bone. It's really hard to plant anything.
Sure. And so in your project notes, you had mentioned urban heat sink. Can you explain what that is?
That's a term. I sort of picked that up from Portland State University. They did a study on heat in the city, in Portland proper. And it's basically, there's so much asphalt and concrete and structures and buildings, and, they're promoting urban density, just for, preserving wild spaces outside the city. But the urban heat sink is basically that, it's just hotter here than, just drive, 3 miles out, and it's not as hot because there's just not all the concrete and asphalt. And, go up to a park and it's cooler. There's a park behind my house. I can walk back there and it's like, 5 degrees cooler. So
yeah, that's significant. And so
it is.
How does planting with native plants or putting in a landscape the way that you recommended in the Portland design, how does that help with the heat sink?
Well, trees are really important. Luckily, I live in a neighborhood with lots of street trees that help cool. But a lot of people don't. And so it's really important to plant trees and really to have all the layers, because you can have large shrubs that are shading the ground.
Yeah. And so so especially with somebody who's not living in an urban environment, moving into Portland, that's something that they really want to consider to help just cool the property around them. What are other things that they would want to consider being new to the Portland area if you're starting to do native garden planting?
What are other things? Well, of course, wherever you move, what are the surrounding properties like? So are there trees next door? Are there trees behind you? Are there street trees? All of those things. It's not just your own landscape, it's the borrowed landscape, what's beyond. And borrowed landscape is wonderful for your view too. So, maybe you move into a house that was just built, and maybe it's an infill house and there's nothing there, but maybe you're lucky to have trees next door. And and if not, you just need to plant more in on your own property.
Yeah, I like that. Look at what your neighbors are doing and how can you either accent or supplement based on what they've done.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. So, you mentioned somebody starting from new, right? So there are a lot of times where people are starting from a blank slate, a newly built house. And so, but that's not always the case. And that's not usually the case, right?
It's not usually the case. No.
What is the typical case, and how does go about planning a design occur in a typical case? If I've just bought a home or I'm starting a new garden design, how do I start?
Well, it depends. I mean, it's not one size fits all. So it depends what's there. Are there trees? Are there no trees? Is there a lawn? So much depends on the client. The environment of the site, the surrounding environment, elevation, clients' needs are actually, what do the clients want? Do they have kids? Do they have dogs? Do they have none of those things?
Sure.
Do they want to attract birds? Bees, butterflies? Are they growing food? There's like a million considerations.
Sure. And so when you were looking at this Portland design, we started with a blank slate. There are some parameters about we wanted to attract wildlife and pollinators. But what was your vision as you sat down and started to draft this design? What did you see for this space?
I didn't really see this as a home where there are children, although there could be. It sort of depends. Is there a park down the street? But my vision was to, there's going to, like, where's the hottest part of this property? And so that's where I said, maybe that's more of a valley kind. It's hot, it's dry, and like the area surrounding the driveway. So I kind of in my head divided it up into 4 spaces. So the front yard has 2, an east and a west, and the backyard has sort of an east and a west side, because this home faces south.
And so are there certain things, you mentioned like placement of where things are in location of, heat and sun and those kinds of things. What are certain things that you like, or is there elements of your designs that you like to carry through every design? Or is it really every design is a unique thumbprint?
Well, they are unique, but I tend to want to fill corners. Like if you look at the backyard, there's a tree in each corner.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a large shrub. And I like to create kind of a habitat against the back fence.
Yeah.
And it also helps create privacy. So privacy, but layering habitat, and that's sort of what's going on in the backyard. It's kind of like an amphitheater of plants, everything's sort of higher against the fence line, and then it kind of steps down to the little back patio. And then, in the front, I like to create a sense of enclosure from the street, but not totally block it off. And of course, when you're backing out a driveway, you don't want anything tall because it's, a safety hazard.
Right. And so, I mean, I certainly noticed that looking at your design that there's like a cascading effect that happens in the backyard, even the front yard. So it's kind of like from the outside perimeter going in towards the house. And I thought that was a really interesting effect.
Yeah.
as you
And
exit space.
yeah, the front yard, it's interesting because the front yard, the right side of it, the east side of it is very much like my own garden.
Sure.
It's got, the trees in the same place. I've got larger shrubs along the east perimeter. So there's a sense of enclosure there. So if you're walking down the sidewalk, that would be where you see birds and just layers of habitat.
Yeah. And so in your plant list, you noted a lot of different benefits to wildlife based on specific plants. Can you talk a little bit about some of those benefits? You've mentioned nesting material. What plants did you select for what reasons?
I would say, well, the trees, of course, are habitat and for birds. So in the front yard, the pine tree, and also for shade and cover. A lot of plants are for cover. There are a lot of birds that actually forage on the ground. And if you have cover in your garden, you'll notice that. And if you don't, you might see a robin out on your lawn picking out a grub or something, but like the wrens will be hopping through the leaf litter under all these shrubs because they like to remain hidden. They like the cover, they feel safe. So like in the front, I would say, there's a street tree. It's a cascara. And right now they're shedding berries all over. So those are for birds.
Yeah.
In the front yard, there's ceanothus, which is a fabulous, I don't know if you know that, it's California lilac. It's a fabulous periwinkle blue blooming shrub, evergreen, but it attracts bumblebees. It is a bumblebee magnet. And bumblebees are some of our native bees, so they're good pollinators. A lot of these plants attract hummingbirds. Red flowering currant is a hummingbird magnet. And then, the currants are then food for birds later in the season. What else? Oh, I would say, grasses are nesting material, the grasses, and leaving the seed heads on a lot of plants like 9-bark. If you leave, rather than cut that off, if you leave that, then in the spring, birds will use that to create their nests.
So just chock full of food, nesting material, coverage for critters to forage around. And so you also included an interesting aspect because there's some edible foods back there, between the front and backyard that are consumable by humans, right? And so can you talk a little bit about what those plants are or
okay, so evergreen huckleberry, Vaccinium ovatum, is a wonderful plant. Evergreen, has little pink flowers for bees. I've seen hummingbirds on it. Has berries. They come on very late. I'm still picking mine. It's just a fabulous plant. It can take deep shade. You might not get berries in deep shade. But it's evergreen, so the yard looks good in the winter. There's some, still something going on out there. It's not all brown and dried out. And it can take sun too. If it has more light, it can get as high as 5 feet. But it's like my go-to plant. And then there's some thimbleberry in this garden, and it takes off. So it spreads. So I put it on the side yard, where it's just really gravel or a cedar chip path. And, that might even be where someone keeps their garbage cans or something, but it's a fabulous tasting berry. And then there's also some salal. Some people don't care for salal. It's by the back of the house. They're fuzzy little berries, but if the temperature, if the weather's been right, they can be quite good too. And it's a variable plant. Like here in Portland, it might grow, and it's a little fussy, but it might grow maybe 2 feet here high in Portland. You go to the coast and it's like 6, 8 feet high. People like cut tunnels in it to walk through. So,
Wow.
because it's so wet. So it does like water, but not too much in Portland. So it's a tricky one. Usually when we plant salal, we plant 4-inch plants, really small, because we always lose about a third of them.
Sure, sure. Are there any other plants that you maybe didn't include in the design that you'd recommend for people who want to expand just homegrown food sources using native plants?
Right there. I know there's some native plants I didn't use, but I know, like they're not food sources though. I didn't use any Douglas fir. I don't think there's room in this garden.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't use, I mean, I used cedar tree because it's just a wonderful tree and it's iconic here.
Yeah.
But and it was used by Native Americans and everything, but it's not exactly fast.
Sure.
So but it can grow up over the fence, and it's a great habitat tree, and raccoons love it.
Sure, sure. And so if we shift our focus a bit to like the front yard, so can you talk a little bit about your tree selection there, the shrubs that you selected, and just why you placed them where you did? You mentioned before a little bit about privacy, but can you expand more on that?
Just a sense of enclosure, so you're not totally exposed. I mean, this could be a street with a lot of cars like mine. So also, but the front yard is really super drought tolerant. It has to be heat tolerant, and colorful. It's a front yard. It maybe a little more structure than in the backyard. Who are we? We're trying to fit our garden in with, the entire street that, let's say, is always, all front lawns with all the shrubs pushed up against the house.
Yes.
It's very typical around here.
Yes.
And it's old. I mean, it's starting to change, but it's sort of an old way of planting a garden. Frame the house, put in a front lawn.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Definitely. Well, that's what we're all about, is getting alternatives into that front lawn.
Right. Get rid of the mow and blow.
Yes. Yes. And so I thought it was interesting. You added in a Willamette Valley prairie mix, and that appears to have a low ground cover, and that almost has an appearance of a typical front lawn, or could be a space that's used for pets or play if there was children in the home.
It could. It's going to be. It has varying heights and at different times of the year. I have a parking strip that is very similar. And so, dogs will mill through it. Once in a while, a kid will get out of a car and step through it. But one thing about that is, I mean, I know there are seed mixes you can buy, but they are more geared toward the farther south, like the oak chaparral. And just it being so hot in the summer in Portland with all the concrete, I sort of chose things, I made this sort of my own mix in my head, that I chose things that I thought could survive. Sure. And, there's some grasses that if you water them a bit, they will definitely remain green all summer. But I wouldn't call it a lawn. It's more like a place to rest your eyes with an occasional pop of color.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of why. But I'm thinking, well, there's a park down the street.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to run on the lawn, there's one everywhere.
Yeah. And you did have a couple of grasses in there that could mimic a typical lawn if someone really wanted to choose to go in that direction, that they could see.
Yes, if they watered it, if they and maybe you could cut it all off at the end of the season, or maybe like in February, or you could leave it, because there are, I think leaving it until February or March is a good idea because the seeds, things will reseed, and also the birds will eat the seeds.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not, it's casual.
Yeah.
It's not a formal garden.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's what we're all about too, right? Breaking those boundaries of what a typical landscape might look like and how we go about putting that around our home and existing in that environment.
Yes. And, just attracting birds and bees and butterflies and interest in, when you have birds outside your windows, you discover things about them that, I mean, nobody knew. You see hummingbirds eating insects. Do hummingbirds eat insects? Yes, they do. It's not just nectar.
Yeah. Interesting. I did not know that. So I learned
Yes.
something.
Yeah. So, it's funny. I have a vegetable garden in the front of my home, and there are birds that come through and actually eat my Swiss chard, and I had no idea. So yeah, they eat, greens. That's just new to me. So yeah, they're warblers.
Yes. So interesting. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times when people are putting installations in, they're talking about the blooms, right? They really want to see the beautiful colors. And so your
Flowers,
design in
yes.
the backyard really demonstrated a lot of texture, a lot of color. Can you talk about your selection and your plant choices in that process to create that look?
Yeah. Well, the Douglas iris. Douglas iris is evergreen, which is really a nice thing. So you'll still have the leaves. It doesn't totally disappear. What else? Oh, the aster, which they, changed the name. The botanical name, I'm still trying to get used to it. But the Pacific aster, it's blooming right now. It's fabulous. It is the most vibrant violet, and there's bees all over it. The ginger, Asarum caudatum, though, native ginger, has the most interesting flower. It's sort of brown, but it's a fun plant for kids because the flower comes up and it's this curly thing you can kind of curl around your finger, the stem. It's like a spiral.
Sure.
So it's like it came, from another planet or something. It's like, wow, what is that? The mock orange, Western mock orange, is fragrant. You probably have that in Wisconsin. Bleeding heart, the Dicentra formosa. So there's there's woodland things blooming, and then there's there's this sunny spot near the patio, where we have, the iris and what else did I put there? The aster, the bleeding heart, and what else have we got here? Trillium, one of the earliest things. Yeah.
And so with the variety of blooms that are happening throughout the season, you said Portland has very mild winters. When is that blooming season? When are you expecting to see all those vibrant colors? When are we expecting it to kind of just quiet down for the season?
I would say there's a oso berry or Indian plum in there, and Omalaria, which can turn into a small tree. It's really a large shrub, but that is the first thing to bloom in the woods, and they're little white sort of bell-like flowers. And then you get the red flowering currant, which is a hummingbird magnet. So I would say in February, and the aster's still blooming now. So February till now.
Okay. That's great. That's a long season. It is a long season.
And, in the front yard, the ceanothus, the California lilac in the front yard, it blooms in cool weather. So you can sometimes see it starting in late February.
Oh,
And because it blooms in cold weather, sometimes it will bloom again a little bit now, because it's cooling off.
sure.
When I say cooling off, it's like 58 at night.
Yeah, yeah. A little different here in Wisconsin, but yes.
Yes.
And so, we talked about turf grass before. And so, a lot of us are going to have to deal with turf grass in our
Yes.
journey of converting. So in your experience, what's the best process for removing turf grass in your area?
Well, here's the deal. If it was sod, particularly in new housing, they put in sod. It has plastic netting in it. So what do we get a sod cutter, peel that off, send it to the dump? What do we do with that? We can't compost it. Or do we compost it and pick out the netting afterwards? And the netting is going to be broken up into all these tiny bits. So, or, we can sheet mulch it. We can just put, 4 inches of tree grindings over our lawn and let it, just rot over the winter and then plant through it. Some people put cardboard over it and then put tree grindings, wood chips basically over it. It sort of depends. Does that lawn have a lot of weeds? Are they invasives? What's in there? Or if it was a lawn that was seeded, then we don't worry about plastic netting. And another thing that can be done is it can be peeled off and flipped upside down to make a berm. So it's best to leave materials on site. It's just some people really don't want to leave green plastic netting in their yard because it will always come back. You dig, you're digging around and there it is.
So how can I find out if I've got this plastic netting? Like, how far down do I need to dig to find it?
Oh, it's really shallow. Maybe, 1.5 inches, 2 inches. It's they grow a lot of turf in the Willamette Valley and down south. It's, turf heaven. But it all has this green plastic netting in it. And, it's so they can peel it up, roll it up and sell it and then lay it out. So it'd be great if they could have, some rice-based biodegradable netting. But part of it is they want, is the, how long they want it to last a certain amount of years, where they're growing it, so before they peel it up, so I don't know how many years. I haven't really studied it, but it's just another thing, plastic netting.
How long has that practice been around?
As long as they've been selling sod. Let's see, probably 40 years. I mean, I'm trying to think of how long I've been doing this and, how long we've been talking about buying sod. It's always like seed or sod. Do you want to seed your lawn? Do you want to just have it instant lawn? It's an instant lawn.
Yeah. So once we deal with this plastic in the sodded, turf grass, or if we don't have that, we've managed to eliminate the grass in some method. And then you talked about amending soil. So can you talk about what am I amending it with? What am I using to provide what the environment that the native plants need in the soil?
Compost. And we can buy compost here. We can buy organic compost if, we're using edibles, but just compost. We have, we all in Portland, the yard debris, we have yard debris bins where all our food scraps and scraps from our yard go, and it gets composted. So it's easy to acquire it here, but it loosens the soil. It creates air pockets, because it's not fine, and helps retain moisture. And it also brings mycorrhizome into the soil. So it's not just this dead soil. I mean, some yards have good soil and others it's just dead. It's like, you dig into it and it's like there's nothing alive in here.
Yeah. And so for somebody who's new to gardening and they're getting into their, their hands dirty for the first time, how am I going to know if my soil is good, I don't need to do anything to it, or light amendment, or it's dead and there's just nothing going on? What does that look like?
What does that look like? I would say, you dig in and it depends if the soil's moist or not, but let's say if it's hard as a rock, like right now, clay soil is hard as a rock. You've got clay. Most people have clay unless they move into a property that had a gardener there that was amending the soil constantly. So, if you dig up some clay and it's wet, or you wet it and you can squeeze it into a form in your hand, you open up your hand and it's got your fingers imprinted in it, you've got clay and you need to amend it with compost. A rule of thumb is to to always amend every planting hole. I mean, it's better to amend the entire site, but that's not always feasible.
That's a big undertaking.
Right? It's a big undertaking. And also, sometimes with new plantings, I recommend that the mulch is also the compost, at least for the first year.
Yeah. And so that's a good point as far as how to make installations. So tackling this all at once is unlikely. Sometimes people are able to do it, but most of the time you're doing this in small bits and pieces at a time. How do you recommend people install a garden like you drafted in phases?
I would say remove existing, if you have existing lawn, remove it where the trees are going to be planted and plant the trees first. And be sure to give them enough space because they take longer to establish. And then let's say the rest of the plants, some of the other plants maybe are meant for shade. Well, we need to establish some shade if there's not surrounding shade, shade from the surrounding properties. So trees first. And anything that grows slow if you can. But I would sort of start out with a tree and then the areas, the privacy areas, and like maybe in the backyard, along the back fence, the trees. And then some plants, if you're patient enough and you wait 3 years, they really will start growing fast. So, depending on your budget, maybe let's say you're going to plant some Oregon grape. It's okay to buy a 1-gallon plant. It will grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes small plants establish easier than just, I want it to look good now. Well, you might want it to look good now, but you might spend a lot of money and then maybe some of them will die. Yes. So, it's that patience. It takes time.
Yeah, definitely. That quality isn't always going to be meeting that instant gratification of wanting to see a full garden. Right? Yeah.
So, and what are your priorities? Really, maybe you're worried what the neighbors think, so you do the front yard first. But most people decide, I want to enjoy my backyard, and they do their backyard first. So
yeah, definitely. And so what does maintenance look like after you make an installation of plants for the first 3 to 5 years? Now, we know it depends on the maturity of the plant, right? So you just said sometimes they thrive better the younger they are, but that also requires more maintenance, right, up front with smaller, younger plants.
Just watering. But a smaller plant's easier to water, takes less water than a larger plant. But watering, and then, but when you have smaller plants, it's really important that you have mulch because weeds will come in between them. Yeah. So, eventually, if you can get the ground covered, you can have less evaporation and fewer weeds.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for your talent and expertise in the development of this design, spending time with us today. I really learned a lot through our discussion today, and as I was reviewing your design and working through that. And I hope those watching this video have gained a lot of knowledge as well and feel confident they could make this design a reality in their own yards in Portland. As we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share with viewers or users of the design, or anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about today?
just that this plan is not one size fits all. It will not work for every site or every person. Some people may be overwhelmed by the variety here, but it's really about creating layers of habitat. So, this is a naturalistic looking plan. I know sometimes people want something more structured and modern, and that is possible. It just would be executed in a different manner.
Yeah, but this is to inspire those ideas and give you an idea of what you could include, and then you can make it your own from there.
Yeah, yes. And some people may not like all the, certain colors or, whatever. I think I might have said something about seeding in some California poppy in the parking strip. And, there are people that don't like orange. So
Right.
people who don't like pink. If you don't like pink, but you want native plants, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And for those watching, the Wild Ones Portland design by Donna, including the plant list, all of her designer notes can be found on the nativegardendesigns.wildones.org site. And your feedback helps us continually improve our programming. We ask that you fill out the survey link that's in the description at the bottom of the video. And we thank you for joining us today. And I hope you learned how we can transform urban Portland into a community full of living landscapes. Have a wonderful rest of your day.